I played on the tour in the 60s, and the balls were so bad in the 60s, you get 12 dozen balls, and you had our compression tester on our ring, and maybe you could get 10 good balls out of 6 dozen. And when I say good balls, they're supposed to be 100 compression. The first time you hit them, they drop to 82, and they never come back higher than that. They lose 18% on the first hit. And they were so bad that you had to curve the ball, because if you just tried to hit it, it might go any place. So you dramatically were moving the ball all the time just so you could make sure you could play it.
Yeah,
and you had to be careful not to take a new ball out on a par 3, because it would always go too far.
Right.
Big Brain Golf Show.
So, for those of you at home, I'm sure you both know Mike and Chris already, but we didn't get a chance to introduce Jerry. And Jerry means a lot to me. This is Jerry Mowlds. I've known Jerry for over 40 years. He's been a PGA member for over 60 years. He was the head golf professional director of golf at a club where I grew up. So I got to see what it was like to be a real golf pro back in the day. This guy is the finest golf pro I've ever met anywhere on earth. Wow. This guy sitting right here. I think back a lot, back to the old days, back to when I was 17, 18, 19, 20 years old, and how much fun I used to have, and waiting for you guys to get off work and go play golf, or to get off work and go play cross-country golf. And so it's wonderful to have you here tonight. I'm so happy to see you. I don't get to see you that often. So I just wanted to make sure I said that.
Well, thank you very much. It's nice to be here. Thank you for inviting me.
You were the best one to ever say, you need to take a day off. You need to get the hell out of here. You're playing, practicing too much, right? And so how has the game and the whole world of teaching changed so tremendously since in that period of time?
Well, obviously, from when I started teaching for first lessons was 1960, half-hour lessons, and they were the going rate was $5, and I was just told to go out there and start teaching. No one told me how to do anything. I played pretty good, and I'd go out and here's how I do it, and I got by pretty well. I had kind of a feel for getting people a little bit better. One of the best things that happened to me is I had a lady, her name was Mrs. Williamson. She was very tall and she was very homely. And she was married to Bruce Williamson, who invented the bag boy golf cart.
Oh yeah.
And they were members in Riverside, and she was about 6'3", and he was about 5'8". But she had a swing that would go down and almost touch her knee at the backswing. And I was a new assistant pro at Riverside, and she's going to try me out for a lesson. And I said, what in the world am I going to tell this woman? And so I knew what her swing looked like, and I knew she'd taken lessons from everybody in Oregon and probably in California, because money was not much of an object, but of course $5 for half hour, right? So I'm walking 50 yards out to the range, and I'm trying to think, what am I going to say to this person? So I go out and I watch her hit a couple shots, and I mention this and I mention that, and she starts to hit it on the center of the club and hits it down. So the lesson, we're 20 minutes into the lesson, a half-hour lesson. She says, well, now, Jerry, what do you think about my backswing? I said, Mrs. Williamson, I think your backswing is just fine. And she beamed at me, and away we went. My thought was, if she hasn't fixed this backswing with every pro in town, I'm not going to fix her backswing. And so I didn't go there. And that was one of the smartest things I ever did. I was about 19 years old at the time, and she told all the ladies what a wonderful young teacher I was, and my book filled up at $5. I couldn't afford to do it at $5 a half hour. I'd better off selling clubs for 3% per admission. But golf has changed because the teaching has really changed over the years, because it used to be some golf professionals taught, but they were golf professionals. They were head pros or assistant pros, or mostly just conventional golf pros. And some were trying to play, but there wasn't any money in golf to speak of, unless you're a head pro someplace. And there were no professional teachers, zero. That didn't come from much later. I don't think there was any real professional teachers around till 1975, 70s, and the early 80s. It was starting to happen a little bit, because people were getting more for their lessons, and if a guy could give a lot of lessons, he could actually make a living teaching. Well, then there's thousands of young golf pros that don't even want, right around the golf shop, they want to be teachers. They want to be, and the PGA won't train it, won't give you a membership for teaching. And they should. The LPGA gives the ladies the LPGA membership as a teacher only, and the PGA's never wanted to do that. The old guard, the old faction thought that the teacher would be they wanted to be the guy, the head pro wanted to be the guy, and he didn't want Joe Schmo, young assistant out there that had a knack for teaching, to be the best, most highly paid person on staff.
Right.
And so there was a resistance to it. It wasn't the conventional way. But that's the biggest difference in teaching, is they're now professional teachers, and they manufacture new ways to do it for their personal gain.
Hey, Mike, have you ever met a golf pro that wanted to stand behind the counter?
I can't say I have. No.
There's no such thing.
No, I don't think so.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah.
The games, the industry has changed for sure. But, you know, with respect to that, you know, years ago, I mean, I've got quite a few years ahead of me, I hope. I got a lot of years behind me, but the golf professional was the club builder. He was, you know, the merchandiser. He ran the golf shop. He gave lessons. He basically mentored the kids that came up and worked for him, and that's how they got positioned to move on to better jobs moving forward. So, you know, I was fortunate early in my career teaching. I started teaching in not legally, but 1987 when I first moved out here and playing the mini tours and what have you, and I was teaching. And I worked with a guy, I'm sure you remember, Johnny Revolta.
Oh, yeah.
And when I was a kid growing up at Heather Downs Country Club in Toledo, Harry Moffett was the head pro there. And Harry was the past president of the PGA.
Yeah,
So I was very fortunate to get a completely different perspective in working side by side with Johnny Revolta, who was magical with the short game and a very creative and innovative guy who didn't use a lot of technology, but you know, it really came down to his skill set to communicate to players on what he felt and how he'd translate what he felt to a player who was trying to incorporate that feel. So he did a great job of using his demonstrations. And you know, with golf instruction, I talked a little bit earlier about credibility. For a really good golf professional, somebody that's going to teach, you'd like to think that they could play a little bit. And years ago, and not so much today, but years ago, a guy that was a really good player who couldn't quite make it on tour, like myself, went into teaching because that was a passion of mine, because I wanted to get better and I was always trying to find new information, what have you. So, you know, coaches, a lot of the coaches today, they may not necessarily be able to play. I hate to say that, but I've seen it firsthand. So you've got people out there that are trying to develop an athlete or teach somebody how to play the game, but they really don't have that feel or that awareness for the feel as well, because they may never experience it. And with golf instruction, it's not just a mechanical application. A lot of it is strategic. How do you play? What do you know, how do you hit a chip? How do you hit a low shot? How do you hit a high shot? Those are feel type deals. There's technique involved, but for a guy to be able to exemplify that he can play the game adds credence and credibility to them sharing the information with somebody else who cannot do that and develop their skill set. I mean, if somebody went to take a lesson from a guy and the guy stands out there to do a demo and he shanks it or comes over the top and Peel shanks it or duck hooks it, the guy's going, I got that shot. I don't need to learn that one. You know what I mean? So it's changed dramatically. It's changed for Chris and I, who are, you know, a little bit younger than you are, and that we've seen what happened early on, and now with the technology, and one of the points that you made earlier, which I think is an extremely valid point, is that there's so much information and there's so much technical equipment that you can use that it's very difficult to get somebody into a place without overloading them with information. And a good teacher will kind of identify whether using video is imperative. And if you're not using video, you're using mirrors, because they have to have that visual connection with what they're trying to do so that they can make some kinesthetic awareness of what they feel. Kinesthetic being, what do I feel? Because, you know, there's, you know, I'm sure we can talk a little bit about muscle memory. And by the way, there's no such thing as muscle memory. It's actually called neuromuscular motor pattern development. And it's a pattern. You learn to move in a certain way because you've been taught through you know, a concept, and then you get a feel for it. You're looking in a mirror, you get a visual reference, and now that's your tape recorder so that you can do it over and over again. But I agree with you in that there's a lot of information. In my studio, in the studio that I teach out of, I use flight radar so that we can track the golf ball. And if the golf balls are decent, they're going to tell me a lot about what the impact, the collision between the club face and the ball are doing that result in the effect of the ball flight. I use video cameras so that I can look at motion from the standpoint of it's not 3D but 2D, where I can see kinematic sequencing, how we segment in the golf swing. Just like a baseball player throwing a baseball, a hockey player hitting a slap shot, a tennis player hitting a forehand in tennis, a shot putter or a discus thrower or a hammer thrower or a field goal kicker, all those motions are very, very similar in what they do. But you have to be able to see it. And then the new age today is the things that you can't see, understanding what are called the kinetics of the golf swing. The kinetics are all about force. We can't measure, when Chris swings a golf club, I can't look at him and go, well, you know what, kinetically, he doesn't look like he's 80% pressure into his left side. Well, that's just information to kind of show what the translation is. I can look at his swing, and a very good trained eye like all of us have here, we can look at his swing and go, well, let's see, are the hips separating properly? Is the upper torso following, being stretched in there? Are the arms following the upper torso? Is the club following the left arm of the lead lever? We can all see that. That's visible. But you can't see kinetics. Now, how do those tools translate today versus, you know, many, many years ago when guys had to translate that stuff? Well, you did it in a different way. You might have a guy hit balls out of a fairway bunker. What does that do? That forces them to create kinetics that are going to move them more left and create a little bit more shaft lean. So in modern day teaching, there's a bridging between technology and then what do you have in your tool bag as far as what drills? Drills are like pills for a doctor. You give a guy a drill. If the drill is correct, it will create the effect of what you're trying to do. Even if you're using all this technology, it doesn't do me any good to tell a guy that, hey, you're not putting enough pressure into your left side, and that's why you're hitting behind the golf ball, unless I can give him a drill to facilitate that whole action. So you can back into it, and I do it both ways. I'll use technology, and then I'll use a lot of tricks and things that I've learned over the years from teaching to convey it, and have them do drills where now they're feeling it. They're not thinking, okay, mechanically, this is what I need to do. I would have them doing certain drills.
Hey, so Jerry, tell me, how do you think the equipment, the modern equipment versus,
Teaching equipment or golf equipment?
golf equipment, how that's impacted instruction?
Well, obviously it's a lot different. It's way different than it used to be. It's the balls and the club combination. There's less spin being imparted to the ball for more distance on the outwards especially. So balls, the guys can be pretty indiscriminate. They can just try to hit a square and hope it goes straight enough. But I guess they call those guys bomb and gougers now. Is that what they call them? And the ball doesn't curve like it used to, but I still see some pretty wild shots by the guys. So, the ball doesn't react any different to a club face and a swing now than it did in the 1890s. You know what I mean? The same thing causes a ball to do the same thing. But, so the physics of it hasn't changed at all. But the equipment's changed. The shafts used to have a lot of torque. They don't have any torque anymore. That was a big deal. The early graphite had so much torque, you could twist it like this, but when you hit a square, it went a long, long ways. But you'd hit them on the toe, you'd feel the club warble all over the place. Well, they finally got the torque out, and in the early graphite shafts, you could get, we told people, if you tried a demo and you could hit it good, don't try to order, buy that demo, because you could never get a duplicate.
That still works today, by the way.
It probably does.
It does.
Right?
It works the same way today.
Yeah, they cannot build two shafts identically. Doesn't seem to be able to do it.
Yeah, and the golf ball, used to curve a lot more because of the way it was constructed.
Right.
So turbolato balls, we could shape them a lot more right to left and left to right, which was great for being creative, the way that you play. And the hardest shot to hit in golf is a straight ball. I would never promote, okay, we want to hit this straight. You can hit a hold off cut or a little baby draw, but it's always easier to move the ball one way or the other. And for most players who are going to have a predominant shape to their ball flight, I try to promote draws versus cuts. but a guy having the ability to move the ball left to right when he has to get around a tree or understand how to shape it. With the old golf balls, there was a lot less or a lot more movement with the golf ball versus the golf ball today. But as far as equipment, when you look at, go ahead.
Well, Mike, I played on the tour in the 60s, and the balls were so bad in the 60s, you get 12 dozen balls, and you had our compression tester on our ring, and maybe you could get 10 good balls out of 6 dozen. And when I say good balls, they're supposed to be 100 compression. The first time you hit them, they drop to 82, and they never come back higher than that. They lose 18% on the first hit. And they were so bad that you had to curve the ball, because if you just tried to hit it, it might go any place. So you dramatically were moving the ball all the time just so you could make sure you could play it. And you had to be careful not to take a new ball out on a par 3, because it would always go too far.
Right.
I remember that compression gauge.
Yeah.
You
still
take
have
your
one.
dozen. You still do.
Yeah, Hogan,
I
used
remember
to,
that.
Hogan used to put them in salt water and spin them to find the heavy side of the ball and then dot it, because the balls were not, weight-wise, they weren't
They were horrible.
symmetrical.
Nicholas used to hit a McGregor golf ball 300 yards, and there was nothing worse than a McGregor golf ball.
Worst golf ball ever.
It was the worst ball, and he could hit it 300. It was unbelievable. We played at the same time, and we're the same age. I'm 6 months older than he is, but I played junior golf tournament when he played in, and so I've always known him and always watched him hit it, and he was incredible how far he could hit the ball.
Equipment has changed dramatically. It's allowed guys to move the ball with much better velocity and much better control for the most part. So the players that are playing the tour today, they're shooting better scores than ever before. But when it comes to the amateur, the guy watching this show, their game, the National Golf Foundation shows statistically, players have not improved. And the reason why they haven't improved is because of instruction. I hate to tell people that. And the reality is that they haven't learned to play the game with all the new technologies and things of that nature. The one part of the game that is always neglected. So you look at a driving range to kind of describe this point, and you got this 11, 12 acre driving range, and it is packed. And then they got this nice putting green. There's about 3,000 square feet, and you see 1 or 2 guys out there. When tour players come out at a tour event, or when they come out and they're working on their game, they'll spend, enough time on the driving range to, get the kinks out, so to speak, but they're going to dominate their time in a practice session, putting, chipping, pitching, and bunker play. And if you can close, you can learn to play the game. And the reason why the handicaps have not changed, and they haven't, the stats show that players are not getting better. There are more players in this and that, but why have they not improved? Because they haven't learned how to play the short game. They haven't learned how to play bunker shots and chipping and pitching and putting. They're so worried about, I got to hit the ball better. It's not a question of hitting it better, and I know you guys can attest to that. You show me a guy that can chip and putt and score, and I can turn him into a really good player. Even if he has inadequacies with driving the ball, doesn't hit it very far, the whole deal. You show me, I got files on guys who wanted to play the tour. They could bomb it, they could shape it left to right and right to left, but you know what? They couldn't close. They couldn't get it up and down. They can't make a putt. They'll never learn to play. And this is the biggest, most neglected part of the game. The equipment has helped tremendously. It really has. For these players today, they're playing golf unlike, think of what Jack Nicklaus would do with the equipment of today. Think how dominant, and he'd play as dominant as the longest guy on tour. That's how talented he was. And all those guys in any era, if you gave them equipment today, like today, they would be unbelievable, and conditions. The golf courses have changed so dramatically to allow for good scoring. You amateurs out there, you think about it. If you could go play a great golf course in garbage condition, or a golf course that's not the greatest design, but it's in great condition, where do you want to play? You want to play where it's conditioned very well, because you're going to score better, and that's more enjoyable.
And the other your comments you made about the ranges, these pyramids of brand new balls and perfect ranges have made them worse, not better, because they stand there and grind in. If they have something going on, they'll grind it into where it take weeks to get rid of it, months maybe. The model was always who's playing. Trevino, look at Trevino, man. There's a lot of people tried to play like Trevino. Why wouldn't they? He hit the ball so solid, it was unbelievable.
Right.
Shut long out and hold. There was a guy that held it down the line, and the ball always cut.
Right.
Held it down the line.
We did an outing with him a few years ago in Pebble Beach, and he was 70 something, and it was absolutely amazing how good he still hits it.
Yeah.
I mean, incredible. I mean, because he's still able to compress it and move it every possible way.
Right.
It was the most beautiful thing I'd ever seen. I couldn't believe how perfect it was.
Right.
So getting back to what you're saying about, some of those old adage ideas, like what about keeping your head still?
Right.
Because wasn't it that Nicholas used to talk about Jack Grout?
Sure, Jack
grabbing the top of his head and always wanting
hair, yeah.
Right. So how has that changed?
It's changed, quite a bit. You're still going to see players that are relatively centered when when they're loading and when they're unloading. So, the thought of turning and staying behind it promotes somebody backing out of it, is how I look at it. When you say, okay, turn and stay behind it, the guy's going to tend to, they're going to tend to go, they're going to load like this, and then they're going to stay behind it. They're going to invariably back out of it, right? So turn and stay behind it has never been a great, translation of what actually should happen. And the other one is square to square. Take it back square, so now the club face is going to stay pointed at the target line, take it back square, and then bring it through square. Well, biomechanically, we don't move this way. Right. We can't, our arms don't work that way, our thoracic rotation doesn't work that way, so we know biomechanically that's not correct. So some of those old things, and then they stick. You hear people say, well, I got to turn and stay behind it. You got to turn and get behind it for sure, but then you got to go.
Right.
You got to go. So players today are loading more to the right, and they are dynamically, putting pressure into the back of the golf ball. And a good way to look at that is if you were going to take an axe and hit a tree, you'd basically load behind it and unload into the tree. It's the same thing. So all those different sporting movements, tennis, forehand and tennis, you can't throw a baseball staying behind it. You're going to post up and you're going to unload. Same thing with forehand and tennis. All those movements.
What about, you remember Nicholas with that big left foot? His left foot would come off the ground, right? And you saw that there were a lot of players where there'd be some left foot movement. And now in the modern game, you see that the hips are turning less.
Well, Nicholas, when he started, was a big boy.
Yeah.
And he had to do a lot of effort to get that big a turn, and his foot came off the ground. If your foot comes off the ground because you make a big turn, it's not a big deal. People got to lifting their foot artificially. If it's pulled off, that's you. If it isn't pulled off, that's you too. Yeah. Hogan didn't move his left foot. He tipped it over a little bit. He didn't lift it.
You go back and you look at those guys, up until probably the early mid '80s. They all kind of move their feet before they hit the ball, right? You look at Johnny Miller balancing his feet. Nick was moving his feet. Well, you go back to biodynamics. I mean, it's they were creating their pressure shifts. You agree with that?
That's
definitely.
correct.
Look at Johnny Miller. He'd stand there and go like this, right? Went like that. And then he went left or right. So he loaded, right? And then he could unload coming back down. Then all of a sudden, these guys got real stagnant. They just stand there like this, right? No movement, still, and then there's no way for them to move. That's when you start seeing a lot of the kind of reversing of the hips, and the dynamic motion wasn't quite as good. So,
right.
And they've come back to that. I think everybody's trying to realize, hey, there is that motion, that athletic movement to get your body moving properly.
Tennis.
Yeah, you're always moving when you're setting up the ball. You're not static. You're always when you're setting up there and you see the feet moving. Even if you don't see the feet moving, the pressure's shifting. And as I talked about in the previous segment, the majority of players at the professional level will start with more weight towards the target, and they'll push into the ground to move their pressure shift to the right, and then they'll pressure shift back to the left. So it's a misconception where players felt like, okay, you set up and then you tilt your body to the right and you put all your weight on your right side, 60-40, then you load and you go. That's not what happens. Players start on their left, predominantly on their left, they push to the right, then they push into the ground from their right to get the pressure to transfer to the left, which is how you create an angle of delivery of the golf ball. I mean, the most important thing, I don't want to get too technical with this, but when you look at golf from the standpoint of the physics, and you look at the laws, if you will, that we are all taught about: speed, centeredness, angle approach, swing path, and club face. The two that are critical in transferring the golf ball from the standpoint of energy transfer, and we talk about line of compression. When you're taking a line of compression is defined as taking a hammer and hitting a nail right on the head, and that line of compression drives a nail. That's the same thing you do with a golf ball, with a golf club. The most important of those 5 fundamental laws is your angle of approach. It's not swing path and club face. It's not club head speed. it's not centerness of contact. If you don't have an angle, no matter what speed you have, you'll get no centerness of contact. And therefore, you don't get ball speed, you don't get the distance. So when you look at that in our business, I think you can agree with me on this, and I'm sure you can too. Most people struggle with their angle of approach, how the club is coming into the golf ball. And it's not a question of it generally coming in too steep, it's a question of it coming in too flat and going from low to high, ascending instead of descending into the back of the ball. Well, that basically, if you can create an efficient angle of delivery coming into the golf ball, your pressure will be left. And if your pressure isn't left, you're not going to promote a very good angle of delivery into the golf ball.
100%.
I think the glue is rhythm and tempo. That's the glue that holds your game together, you know, the angles and the path and the face, and that makes the ball do what it does, but how a person keeps his game. Back in the 60s, there were so many players, the forward press has gone away. Yeah. You don't see the forward press anymore. That was a big deal. Everyone will press to the left, turn to the right, and swing, and it's a rhythmic deal. And I teach a lot of rhythm because the typical people, I don't teach a lot of pros anymore, I'm too old for it, but I see they want to be amateurs, you know, and most of them they're thinking so hard, and as you say, they're locked into position, they don't move. I said, just get some motion, you know, and I teach a forward press to the left, turn to the right, swing. And I did that as a kid. I could play good that way.
Yeah, the forward press puts the pressure left. That's what's happening. That's what happened. When you forward press, you put the pressure left to allow you to get pressure into your right side when you're doing that. And you're right, it's rhythm and timing. You know, you look at, for example, my personality, which is, you know, kind of aggressive, if you will. My golf swing is fast and aggressive.
You think that?
I don't have a passive motion in my golf swing. I have a pretty aggressive, as you know. And so personalities, you can kind of tell. You're not going to see somebody that's relatively aggressive stand up there and just kind of, you know, get in there and squeeze it lightly and then just kind of pull it back and load it and then just, you know, boom. You're not going to see that. So personalities kind of fit. Look at Larry Mize. Great example of one of the best timing, rhythm, sequencing that you're going to see in golf. He's the nicest, what a great personality, just a sweet man, and very courteous and considerate. And I won't mention some of the fast swingers and their, you know.
Payne Stewart lived on his rhythm too.
Yes, Payne was, absolutely. So timing and rhythm is extremely important because it supports proper sequencing.
And you can have perfect positions without timing and rhythm. You can't do it all. You can't do anything. Vice versa.
Right.
You can have pretty iffy positions with great timing and rhythm. You look great. What about Furyk? You know, his position, but he does it. His rhythm in it is very good. You know, so to me, that's the glue. I tell people that's what you need to get to where you can do it the same all the time.
Yeah.
So I might digress slightly, but you know, you talked a little bit about watching back in the old days, watching Nicklaus. I mean, did you ever see any of the other? Did you ever see Hogan hit it? Did you ever see Walter Hagen? That's a little bit.
Oh, come on now.
No, I didn't mean Walter Hagen. I meant Byron Nelson or Trevino.
No,
those guys in their prime.
I saw Ben Hogan hit balls, but only when he was after he'd retired. You know, and I watched him one time hit balls, and
was it still pure?
Oh yeah, and he'd take a lot of time between balls. You know. He'd hit a ball, he had his caddy out there, he'd hit a ball, and he'd smoke his cigarette, then he'd hit another ball, and he'd smoke a little bit more. He was really very lengthy practice. Took him 30 minutes to hit 15 balls.
Wow.
Just slow and looking around and just kind of thinking, you know. He experimented a lot more than I think people thought he did. I think he was always thinking.
No question.
He was always thinking.
He was always thinking.
You know, he liked to fan that thing open and
love it.
And
love it.
You know, I saw. You know, I was a watcher. I didn't have any lessons.
You were a watcher.
Yeah,
totally right.
I watched, and when I first went on the tour, the first person I happened to see play that I watched a long time was Tony Lima. I just happened to get there when he was there, and he had a buddy out there, and I was sitting on the range behind him watching. We all had the shaggers out there in the range. And his was out there with a 6-iron or something, and Lima's talking, and he hit his ball, and he hit it to the right of the caddy. So the caddy runs to his left, gets the ball into another kid's area. So he comes back and he does it again, and he does it again. After about 4 balls to the right of the caddy, his caddy's left, he saw the caddies talking out there, and they traded places. He said, look at that kid. He said, no matter where he goes, I'm going to hit it to the right of him because I am never starting the one left of the target.
Love it.
So, but I'm listening to that and watching it, and Lima had a good swing. I mean, he was a strange guy. It took him forever to do well.
Right.
In 7 years, he's out there hacking it around, and he finally got his money to play in Portland from Malarkey. Malarkey Lumber.
Yeah, I remember that.
Company's still there. He gave him the original, and then he owned him. Cost Lima a lot of money to buy Malarkey out later.
So do you remember we were together when Johnny Miller was doing a little talk for us, and he started to talk about when he got under the gun. You remember when he was always on TV, that this guy's choking his guts out, the whole deal, right? And so somebody in the crowd asked him, well, Johnny, when you got really nervous back in the old days, what did you do when you were choking your guts out? And what did he say? Do you remember?
Yeah, I can't remember what he said.
He's an imitator, right? He imitated.
Oh, we always do imitate Trevino and
Tony
when
Lima.
So when he wanted to hit a draw, he imitated Tony Lima.
Yeah.
That's how he hit his draw, this direction. And he imitated Trevino when he wanted to hit a fade, yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So he got outside his body and went and tried to mimic an entirely different golf swing from his to get him through the chokes. I thought it was the most fascinating thing I'd ever heard.
That's how I used to shake
You
it.
used to do that too.
I did that, and it hurt me. I could look at somebody and feel like I could do it that way, and I could do it that way, pretty much, you know. But a lot of times, I didn't know who I was. You know what I mean? I was always being somebody else. I was always taking it high like Nicholas, or I was doing something, and I was holding like I was strong grip, and I'd hold, and I could do that stuff pretty well. But under the gun, it's not a good thing to have a lot of.
Right.
You got to have something that you
You don't want
trust.
to have a whole
You
bunch of, you
have
don't want
to
to
have
have 3 other guys in your head.
It helped me be a better teacher, the fact that I could see what they were doing, good or bad, and kind of mimic it. Now, if I was swinging like that poor person there, what would I try to do to fix it? And it helped me teach better, and it helped me, and I could do it a lot of different styles, and because I was a mimic, that's how I learned to play.
So to kind of summarize the deal, you know, the conversation is there's a lot of similarities still.
Yep.
Sure, there's a lot more technical aspects now, the way everyone teaches. But for the average player or the beginning player, it still goes to rhythm and sequence and ball flight and, you know, all the different things that we've been talking about, right? Is there anything that you would add to that?
I'd say that you have to own your own swing to a degree.
Yeah.
I mean, I remember Palmer talking about that in a commercial, you know, years ago. It was a campaign that you have to own your own swing, and to a certain degree, you can't entrust everything with what you're learning from a teacher. You're going to have your own sifter, and there are going to be certain things that you'll be able to work with and incorporate in what you feel naturally that you do well, and be able to play from there. I think you have to have some ownership of your golf swing.
Right.
Yeah, but you know, we've talked about all this stuff, all these positions, everything is going to happen, right? What's the real reason people can't play golf? They have zero idea what these things are doing. You know, you look at the guys on TV, or they grew up playing other sports. You know, they sort of learn how to educate their hands.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you talk about line of compression. Yeah, well, what is that line of compression, right? But you know, they don't have that ability. They overuse the hands. You know, instead of having the pivot control the hands, you know, and learn to put that line of compression on there, right? And that's the biggest reason they can't play golf. And it's flashing. And you talk about coming shallow, right? It's all this stuff, right? So, you know, for people to get better, to really get better, they're gonna have to learn what their hands are doing and how to get that line. Because I can put a golf ball 2 feet in front of me, I can put it back here, I can put it outside, and I can learn to aim. I can aim my hands at any one of those spots. You know, if it's behind me, I'm gonna have to release it early, but I'm still aiming the sweet spot in the back of the ball, creating the line of compression. So, you know, until people understand that, that's one reason they don't get any better, no matter how much time and effort you put into golf.
I think that along with those lines, I kind of have hands and arms as a unit.
Right.
Correct.
And I think about, I've helped a lot of people over the years by telling them, how do you think Dennis Walters hits at 290 sitting on a wheelchair? You know, he's fixed and his torso turns and his arms, and like DeChambeau told he told Faldo in that clip, he said, I try to keep my lower body from moving. It moves, but I don't try to move it. I'm trying to move the top and my arms as hard as I can, and hands, arms and hands. Right. And so I don't like people thinking much about their legs and their hips and sway. It's all right if they need it, but I see far more struggling players doing badly because they're trying to control their body motion rather than the club with their hands and arms and put the club on the line. And so I've had people sit on a stool and hit balls to get where they need to be, and then, okay, now maybe let your body just accommodate. I've written notes, hundreds of notes I said it to a lot of people. Your body, my opinion, should accommodate the swing and not dominate the swing. And a lot of people on the other side of that.
Well, I think though, once they learn how to do this and understand what their hand's supposed to be doing, then have a little bit of understanding of the body, start to put that together, then you can get into, hey, what's the dynamic movements, right? And then kind of build it off that and you become a better player. But, with all this going on, they got no chance,
Yeah, and so when you go play golf, you don't always get a lie like this.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
You get your 1 foot up, or the ball's below you, or it's above you, if something's going wrong, you got to, and so sometimes you're not allowed, you can't turn perfectly.
Right, yeah.
You got to balance on 1 foot or the other, and you got to figure out a way to still make the ball go where you need it to go, which is hands and arms and the club on plane. And the angle is what you can get. You don't always get the perfect angle. Sometimes you have to do something else. You know that.
So what happens is when you were younger, you had a ball sitting in a divot, what'd you do?
Swing down at it more.
You went this way, right?
Yeah.
The ball sitting in the rough, you probably swept a little bit more, around the green, a little more extension this way, low shot, you're gonna go that way. So that's higher handicaps don't have that. The better players have it without even, they learned it, you learned it, and I learned it, stand on the driving range, they told you to clear the golf balls outside of the range and back into the range, one hand, hit it low, high with just one hand, so.
That's right.
Well, they
Generally
understand
the left hand.
they understand that there's some wrist power somewhere in there, but they don't know how to apply
They don't know how to apply it.
They don't get the arms going with
Yes,
it,
they
it's a
apply it.
combination. You roll it open, roll it closed, whatever you want, shut it down, the one plane swing,
You can hit it from anywhere.
in a lot of ways
You
you do
can
it.
swing it any way you want,
Yeah,
just
any
hold
way you
your
want.
hands
A lot of
if they're
ways.
educated.
There you go.
Weak
So
grip, strong grip, I change daily myself.
you what?
I change it daily myself.
He does too.
I change my swing thoughts in every
Jesus,
hole.
don't ever get him in a bunker. Jesus, might not get out. So we're gonna see you guys next time. We want to thank the Club Fix for letting us use this great facility, and make sure you check us out on Instagram and Twitter, and look for the Big Brain Golf Show on YouTube. And until next time, play hard.